Hello, I'm Tim. And right now I'm going to talk about how to fix a Gamecube. Right now I have it plugged in. But let's unplug all these. So with the Gamecube, let's place everything back on top. Alright, here we go. So here's the Gamecube. One of the ones that has the digital port. But what I'm going to talk about is how to actually fix the Gamecube itself. When I got this from Goodwill, it did not work. And they said that the GameCube itself, the disc laser said it would not read the disc. But I'm going to show you a simple thing after taking out all the screws, making it easy for yourself to sort of manipulate and sort of adjust everything really variably quickly. Can't speak today, but you basically just take off the drive. Hopefully nothing falls off, but then you just have the I/O shield on the GameCube just to make sure that none of the electronics actually interfere with the other motherboards that are actually going on. There's one here, and then there's one here. This would be the main motherboard. Right now I have it plugged in. I really don't want to take it off, but that's where your graphics card and your CPU are at. But what I'm going to talk about today is how to actually fix this part right here. So, as you can see, it is a very simple piece. And to take off the laser, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is undo this, make sure that the tabs right here, and right here are taken out. And also, right here is the variable resistor that I'm going to be talking about. To tweak your GameCube so that it can actually read the disc. Because sometimes that resistor gets nudged in the wrong direction, and it causes the GameCube to say no disc. And it either reads past it, or it does something even more insane, more on the lines of it reading too small of an area to actually read the whole disk, which you really want it to actually do. So, you don't need to take anything else off. All you have to do is make sure all the screws along the edges are taken off so that the I/O shield on the bottom actually is removed. You want to put that onto the motherboard to make sure that that is actually put in place. There are many other screws on the GameCube device itself. Like right here. Oops. There you go. So right at the edge, right along the ports, there are more screws right here. And that would be another thing to actually take off in order to actually take off the I/O shield. To take off the ports, all you have to do is nudge it in the right direction. All it is basically clipped onto these pegs right here. So that just releases it so that you can actually unscrew this part right here. Whoops. Sorry. I'm new at this. So it makes it easier to actually take this off. So then, after that's done, and you sort of just push this out of the way, you can take this there we go. So there's a port right here that you just unplug, and it's a simple disconnect so that you can at least easily take this off, and that reveals the main motherboard on the device. But it's not really, it's necessary in order to take off the I/O shield, but you have to remove all the screws and then just make sure you put it back on before you actually start testing the device to make sure that it actually works properly before you actually put everything together. Now I'm saying actually a lot, but that'll make it easier for it to actually work. And another actually is put on the board. But when you're actually testing it, what you need to do is replug this in, otherwise it won't power on and the fan won't run. Sorry about that, but I basically put this back on, and right here is actually the power button. Without it, it can't turn on, besides the fan and all that. But we just plug it back into the device, make sure it snaps in, and it places right there. But when you're actually putting everything onto the board, place the ports, adjust it to where it's actually nice and snug, press it down. If you need to get a Q-tip, get a Q-tip and just wipe it off. The dry Q-tip is actually fine, so it won't damage the device. For what it's worth, it won't actually ruin anything. So just make sure everything is back in order before you actually put anything in there. So there we go. Now everything's back together. Well, for the most part. Then you just clip on the front. You don't need to put this on just yet. I would say wait for that at the end. So just place this over there. Whoops. I shouldn't have done that, but it's fine. It's cracked enough. But there we go. Now you have the device looking like this. You may not have the Game Boy player, but we're not going to be testing that at the moment. So now you have the device. Now what you want to do is notice that the lens right here is in the optimal position, and well, you can't really tell that until you turn it on. So what you need to do when you turn it on, press this button and it shall power it on. But without this sort of just pressed, leave your finger on there, don't press it all the way down. If you press it all the way down, it will say that there's something wrong with your Gamecube. Just turn it off and then turn it back on, but make sure you just leave your finger on there, pressing it down just slightly. It's actually a half plug, so just press it down enough to where it actually spins the disc and you can see the laser going back and forth. You may need to do this a couple of times, but it depends on how badly your device is. So then what you do is, if you needed to test these, you could just place them in, and it's just nice to have. So have it in there if you wish, but not really necessary. All that we're doing is just testing this. So plug in your cord for your Gamecube controller, and then place it off to the side. I really don't need to do this while I'm watching, but to me, everything is fun. So, but plug in all your cables, make sure everything's plugged in. So, there we go. So we just plug in the power cord and the video connection. So now that your device is up and running, you'll see something sort of similar like this. So right here is the power connection, and right here is the video connection. Whether you have S-video, or regular video. It can use component with the digital, but I don't have a component cable at this moment, so it's not likely to work for me. So then what we do is we turn on the machine. As you can see my projector up right there. So we press the button, and then we can see the Gamecube screen. So right then and there, you go to the disk setting. It will say that error occurred, so turn off the device and make sure your disk. So what you need to do to trick this, and it is pretty easy to trick it, but that's for another story. So you turn it off. Make sure that you have the button held right here. If you don't have this held, then what it will do is not really turn it on. So you do that, then you press this button. So you just have it held gently right there. Then you go up. Then you go to gameplay. You go there. It'll basically say, please turn off your device. Okay. So what that is I don't have it completely snapped in place. So make sure all the connections are actually plugged in and correctly situated in the device before you actually power it on. Otherwise it will say error, error. Yeah. Alright, so you turn on the device, but make sure you have your other finger on the button. So turn on the device like this. It'll start reading. So now you see the Gamecube back there. You go up, and it says that there's no disk. So normally what would happen is you would release it, set it off to the side, get your Gamecube disc, whatever it might be. I'm using Crash, but to me, I just find the ironies of having a PlayStation game on a Nintendo system. Even though it's not solely PlayStation, to me it makes me laugh inside, but it's up to you whatever you wish to use for a test disc. It could be anything. DVDs will not work, so I wouldn't try a DVD because it most likely won't work in this system. So you just place it on, and what you should normally see is when you press down the button on the side, it should load up something like this. And then all you have to do is press start. And then you get the title screen. There we go. I see my Nintendo Universal, and the disc works fine. So just have your finger on there, and it'll work. So right now I'm just going to turn it off. Now, let me show you actually through the video. It might be easier to actually see what I'm talking about. So let me show you. So here it is. Alright, now that you're back, I'm. Well, I did get interrupted, so I already started putting everything together before I noticed that, well, I lost my audience in a way. So let me take off the fan real quick, and I'll show you some of the things. I'm not going to unscrew everything, just makes it harder to put it back together, and it'll take a long process as I sort of took way too long. That's why my application crashed, so there we go. I'm going to take off the power supply, take off the plastic, just helps. So what I do, let me take this off. So what I did was I just screwed everything back in place. There are screws underneath the disk drive, so you will need to do that before you take it apart or anything like that. In order to access the disk drive to change the variable resistor, you will need to take off the screws that are underneath this I/O shield. It just helps protect the disk drive from the heat sinks on the motherboard, and so that none of the electronics get finicky. And the motherboard, the port drive, the port board, and the disk board, they all have different connections, so it makes it easier to connect it when you know what you're doing. If you say that you don't have enough experience, anyone can do this, so it's not too hard. They're just simple connections. And as I showed you before, it's not that hard. So now let's, there it is. So slide it back in there. Plug the cable back in. Sorry, you might not be able to see it at first. Possibly not. Oops. Make sure that's snug too. So, there we go. Clips don't always want to stay in place. Sorry, it's late in the day. Alright, now everything's put back on, plastic. The last thing would be to place the screws back in that I just took out. So, take this, and place screws back in, and make sure the cable's managed where the hooks are. I did show you, but things go wrong in life. There's no reason to let it down. But I do have knowledge of circuitries, so if you do have any questions, I can answer. There we go, nice and snug. Now we take this. Be very careful because sometimes the case can actually push on the power button, and when it does, it will turn it on as soon as you plug it in. So just be wary of that before you place on. There should be guides, plastic guides right here, right here, right here. Oops, there we go. Right there, and right there. Those guides are actually meant to be there for the reason that it helps put it back together when it's all finished and done. And as I did say before the computer interrupted me, you will need a Gamebit drive. You can search for it online, and you will need, I believe it's the smaller one, but it, I think it's mostly the larger one. So just make sure you have them both on hand. It's good to have in case you have a Sega Genesis or any of the games that you wish to look at. It also helps to have it when you're trying to make sure that everything works on a Game Boy device or a Game Boy Color. The Game Boys actually have the Gamebit connection. It is the smaller one though for those. So just make sure that you have the handle, head on the back. So be very careful. Well, not too careful. You really don't have to. Just make sure all the guides are lining up, and it should just snap into place. So now you turn it up. You guys will not have to take any of this stuff off. It is not required because it doesn't interfere with you taking apart the device to the point that you just need to take off all those screws. You won't be replacing the motherboard or anything like that. Oops. Yeah. There we go. I guess it's angled on mine. But let's just make sure the power button is. Yep. Seems to be working just the way it should. So just keep all the plastic things like this on the device. If it doesn't have it, then sorry you lost it, but it does happen with devices that are older. So just be careful to leave those on. It protects the ports from getting dust particles in them and end up corroding the device after a while if you spill anything. So just be wary of that. So now you will need the 4 screws that have the Gamebit on it. So place it right in the hole, then screw it in, and no dirty thoughts, please. And no dirty comments either. It doesn't help anybody, and it is just plainly rude. So just don't do that. So yeah, just screw them back in place. If your Game Boy device if your GameCube does not work, then there's another problem entirely. You might have to change the disc, the laser. Just be careful. I don't have the corrective lenses on to protect my eyes, so just be careful not to shine them in your eyes. You might ruin them in the end, but as you can see, it won't help me any. All right. And as anyone does know, I do like seeing devices and taking them apart, but if they're newer devices, I will not take them apart because in case I really do want to just give it back to Nintendo and say fix it, I'd rather have them fix it. If you want to mod your system, go ahead, but it's not up for me to judge. I like to keep everything the way it is and the way it was intended. Yeah, everyone has their own opinion. Right. Place this back on. You won't, most of you won't have this, but you might. The disc will run more than the actual Game Boy player, so be wary of that. And you can make copies and trick the device, but it's not really necessary to actually make a copy yourself. You can. It is a disc, but it's really not necessary. So, I'm just using my thumbs to screw it in place. But if you need to take this apart again, I would suggest not placing this back on at all until you know that it works. So, there we go. The Game Boy with the Game Boy player. So, now, let's play some... Right. Let's just play. Plug everything back in.
Can I give you a bowl of applesauce?
I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. Sorry, I may have been interrupted, but I live with my mom at the moment, so sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to save money. Money's always the issue. You want to save as much as possible, as much as you can, before you move out or go anywhere. Alright. Now, let's play. Alright, see you guys later.